If you live in Canada and you believe that immigrants are taking your jobs, you might actually be right. But it's not in the way that you think. Canada has seen historic levels of immigration in the last number of years, fueled most recently by changes to how employers access temporary foreign labor. These changes, designed to address a worker shortage that may not even exist, help to create a system of scams, worker exploitation, and stagnation that deprive Canadians of jobs, reduce innovation in the workplace, and traps foreign workers in a system that benefits primarily predatory employers. Back in 2013, then Prime Minister Stephen Harper was involved in a scandal. The Harper government had allowed companies in Alberta, Harper's base, to pay thousands of foreign workers less than Canadians. The goal was to drive wages down and benefit employers in the province. A report from the C.D. Howe Institute in 2014 showed that the Temporary Foreign Worker, or TFW program, was driving up unemployment rates in Alberta and BC as it displaced local workers. News reports came out at the time that hospitality workers were fired in order to be replaced by temporary foreign workers, and applicants at a local McDonald's were ignored in favor of foreign labor. The next year, not yet Prime Minister Justin Trudeau wrote an op-ed in the Toronto Star criticizing the temporary foreign worker program, saying that it needed to be scaled back dramatically and refocused on its original purpose, to fill jobs on a limited basis when no Canadian workers can be found. That op-ed is very ironic in hindsight. In Justin Trudeau's time as Prime Minister, the program has expanded dramatically. At the end of 2021, more than 775,000 foreign workers had temporary work permits, an increase of 92% from 2015 and 600% from 2000. And to be clear, this isn't in itself a bad thing. Canada experienced low levels of unemployment heading into 2022, staying at or a bit below 5% for some time. Statistics Canada put out reports suggesting that Canada was experiencing a worker shortage. In order to bring in foreign labor under the TFW program, employers usually have to complete a labor market impact assessment, or LMIA. The LMIA is to demonstrate that no Canadians or permanent residents were available to fill the job, and so a worker from abroad needed to be brought in. So theoretically, Canada is experiencing a labor shortage. Canada has an extremely low population for its size. In order to stimulate growth, foreign workers should be brought in to fill those jobs. In an ideal scenario, this benefits employers and workers who are able to use their employment as a stepping stone to achieve permanent residency in the country. The problem is, it's not clear if the worker shortage actually exists, at least not in the way that's being portrayed. Let's just look at the numbers for a moment. In 2022, following Statistics Canada's report that there's a labor shortage, in the fourth quarter of that year, there were 497,000 job vacancies requiring a high school diploma or less, and 296,000 unemployed Canadian-born individuals who would have qualified for those jobs. Looking at jobs requiring post-secondary education, there were 246,000 job vacancies, while there were 240,000 Canadian-born individuals and about the same number of immigrants living in Canada who could have filled those openings. Now, just because you have a post-secondary degree doesn't mean you necessarily qualify for one of the job vacancies listed above, but in 2022, Canada had 1 million unemployed Canadians, another million who were underemployed, and another million who had stopped applying for jobs because they cannot find a suitable job. That's 3 million Canadians in a country of 38 million people. The job market is supposed to work on the principles of supply and demand. If unemployment is high, companies can keep wages and benefits low, since workers will take what they can get. If there's a shortage of workers, employers should, in theory, be forced to raise wages, improve working conditions, or potentially replace vacant jobs with technology. For many Canadians, low-wage work is not even worth applying for. It does not provide a career path, the pay is low, and it rarely comes with benefits. In Canada, 63% of job postings offer wages below what the average unemployed person is looking for. The Temporary Foreign Workers Program provides a way around this for businesses. If Canadians aren't applying because the positions are not desirable, they can maintain that no local labor was available and bring in foreign workers. Those workers are now put in a tough spot. Often a worker is only in the country on a particular contract. They have very limited mobility. If a worker complains about long hours, low pay, or poor working conditions, it could potentially lead to them losing their job, being deported, or receiving fewer points towards permanent residency. So foreign workers accept the poor job conditions without complaint, Companies can profit off their labor without making their jobs desirable to Canadian-born workers, and the system continues to perpetuate itself. Migrant workers were especially vulnerable during COVID-19. Juan Chaparro, a worker from Mexico who was working on a farm in Ontario in 2020, was bedridden for days before eventually dying of COVID. During that time, he was not isolated, despite living in a bunkhouse with several other employees. Out of 216 workers on the farm, 196 tested positive, and 3 were hospitalized. Scotland Farm pleaded guilty in court for failing to take reasonable precautions to protect employees and was fined $125,000. In 2022, that same year where 3 million Canadians were un- or underemployed, 220,000 positions were filled through the Temporary Foreign Worker Program. Now, quick caveat. There are many legitimate reasons for bringing in foreign labor, and many legitimate reasons for Canadians to be un- or underemployed that are not the result of a systematic issue with how we manage foreign and domestic labor. But particularly in low-wage work, there are many markers of a problematic system. In the last 2 years, the federal government has lessened restrictions on the Temporary Foreign Workers Program, allowing companies to employ up to 20% of their labor with foreign workers, up from 10%. While migrant workers are easy to exploit once they're in Canada, there's another system in place that allows employers to make tens of thousands of dollars off workers before they even get here, using a labor market impact assessment. As I mentioned earlier, an LMIA is often completed to demonstrate that there are no local workers available for a job, and so foreign work needs to be brought in. One of the things an employer has to do to qualify for an LMIA is prove that they have advertised sufficiently for a Canadian citizen or permanent resident to fill the position. This typically involves advertising the position for at least 28 days. But this goes back to the previous point. If you advertise a job that nobody wants for 28 days, it doesn't necessarily demonstrate that there isn't local labor available to fill the job. It can also demonstrate that your job does not meet the wage demands of the market. Regardless, a profitable and prolific scam has been running around LMIAs for at least a decade, where employers and immigration consultants tell potential foreign workers they need to pay tens of thousands of dollars to cover the cost of an LMIA. The actual cost of an LMIA all in can be in the range of $2,000 to $5,000 depending on the circumstances. Costs that are supposed to be paid by the employer. The going rate for the LMIA scam is about $50,000, although it can be much more. People are willing to pay because it's often a route to settling in Canada. Once an employer has filled an approved LMIA, they can attach a worker's name to it and issue a formal job offer. A skilled occupation job offer is worth 50 points towards becoming a permanent resident. An upper management position is worth 200, even before entering Canada. Across the country, you need around 60 points to be considered for a permanent resident position, although spots are very competitive, and the more points you have, the more likely you are to be accepted. Getting a job offer through an LMIA can be worth more points than a year of skilled work in Canada. All that to say they are highly desirable if you're looking to come to Canada, and therefore easily exploitable, but also at times mutually beneficial. Some workers then arrive in Canada to find the job offer they received never actually existed, or the actual job they are working has longer hours, worse conditions, or less pay than what they were promised. In some situations, a worker may be paid the same on paper as a Canadian or PR would be paid, but some of their wages are kicked back to the employer through the immigration consultant, effectively allowing the employer to pay below minimum wage, affecting the economy and labor market. The federal government added new restrictions and regulations to prevent these scams from occurring, but most reports suggest they are still widespread. In general, the government is doing a poor job in several stages of the process. Employers do not have enough incentive to try and find local workers, and foreign workers are either able to more or less purchase a path to permanent residency, or they're often scammed by immigration consultants and then exploited by employers. The result is low-paying, low-quality jobs and a pay-to-win immigration system that is not functioning as intended. Let's look at one last area where the immigration process in Canada is broken. By 2027, it's forecasted that 1.4 million international students will come to study in Canada. Canada has forecasted a goal of admitting 500,000 permanent residents a year beginning in 2025. Around 59% of international students intend to apply for permanent residence after school, meaning of 1.4 million students, approximately 826,000 will try to apply for permanent residency, over 300,000 more than Canada will be accepting just in international students alone. Recruiters for Canadian schools have been criticized for overselling the ease of transitioning from college to permanent residency in Canada, making it one of the main draws of Canadian schooling. Some students complete their degree only to find out they aren't eligible for a postgraduate work permit because the school they attended was not on the list of designated learning institutions. But in many cases, the LMIA system makes it easier for a worker to apply for permanent residency without ever setting foot in Canada than it does for an international student who has studied for 4 years, worked for an additional 3, and built a life in the country. Systematically, Canada is denying permanent residency to many who have chosen to build a life here and who have proven their merit, instead giving positions either to those who can pay for it through illegal and unethical means, or those who are most easily exploitable by massive corporations, who choose to undercut the labor market, slow innovation, and pass over potential employees already living in Canada. If you need a final reason to be skeptical of the LMIA system, Canada actually is facing a labor shortage in specific industries, most prominently healthcare and the trades. Yet LMIAs are disproportionately approved for positions like food service supervisors, administrative assistants, and cooks. Foreign workers can be and are an important and necessary part of Canada's economy and growth, but the way it's currently being handled is disconnected from what the economy actually needs. Immigration has been targeted as a solution for many of Canada's woes, as the country looks to grow its population, attract bigger businesses, and boost its economy. Yet the current state of immigration is in many ways counterproductive to those goals, not targeting the right industries and undercutting the labor market. So when someone says that immigrants are taking Canadian jobs, in a way they are, but they've done so because the government, employers, and consultants have chosen corporate profits over people and allowed an exploitative system to grow and thrive at the expense of the economy, Canadian citizens, and honest people trying to immigrate to Canada.